So when I used to visit Kings Heath as a child, I grew up in Duston, so the next village along or suburb along, and it was only a 10-minute drive, but it used to feel like a huge adventure, like going to my nan and pap's house in Kings Heath on Bourne Crescent, which is on a hill, which looking at it now, it's not a very big hill, but when we would drive up there, we'd always have to park at the bottom of the hill and walk up to the top where my nan lived on the end house. Growing up as a small child, my nan and pap lived there in Bourne Crescent. I know that my mum, her sister and her brother grew up in that house on Bourne Crescent as well. And my dad separately lived there with his mum and dad, and also they ran a pub in Kings Heath as well. We used to walk down the hill from my nan's house and through the spinney, and I just remember looking across the spinney and it was all like a wild meadow and it was just full of wildlife, and you could see for it felt like miles anyway, it felt like, and then you'd see the edges of Holston firs, the big trees from in the distance, so it felt like a really kind of big adventure. I did speak to my mum on the phone on the way here, and I asked her, because initially I was like, what's the precinct? She said, oh, it's the shops, and then she listed all of the shops that were there, and she said there was a co-op, 2 butchers, 3 greengrocers, a bakery, 2 hardware stores, a post office, a hairdresser's, a wool shop where you'd buy wool, a chemist. There was another like off license, and then she also mentioned like an adventure club for kids that was in the area on the green, and that all the kids from Kings Heath were able to go to this adventure club and be part of it was like outdoor learning basically.
So I arrived in the country in November 1972 as a refugee from Idi Amin's Uganda. With my family, and we were rehoused from a resettlement camp to come to Northampton in the March of 1973. We were given a house in St. James, and I was 16 at the time, and I was trying to find some work because we didn't have any money in those days, so we were all trying to work, and I found a job going at Kings Heath off license. So I came up here and walked up to the off license and said I was interested. Fortunately, the owner was there, and he interviewed me for the role for the job of sales assistant, and he was so helpful. He understood. There's not many people who understand what it's like to be a refugee and have nothing, and you come in and you're almost fighting all the time to explain yourself. So I worked in that off license for quite a few months. I think in fact it was over a year. One evening, was Saturday evening, one of the regulars popped in and said, listen, there's a really great band playing at the Fantasia, which was just around the corner from the off license. And he told me the name, Bob Marley. I never heard of him. I wasn't really up to date with the music in this country at the time. And so I thought, right, okay, we'll pop down, and I popped in. And only years and years later, we found out who Bob Marley was. Saw him in one of his first tours in the country. That was actually the first time I walked into that place, because I knew it was there. When I walked in there, I was quite amazed. I mean, it's like, to me, coming from Africa, this was like a little movie set, where things happen, and you see in the films, that people dancing, and there was, so it had a circular dance floor with a little stage area where the musicians played. And there was a balcony that ran along in a circle as well. So there were people upstairs looking down to the music and the people dancing. It was a sight and a half for me. I thought, wow, it's sort of this loud music playing, and it's become surreal. Yeah, it was quite strange, the coincidences that happened around that period. It was when we left Uganda, we were all. It was a mad rush to leave the country, so nobody had time to even say goodbye. Friends didn't have time to say goodbye. We had 90 days to leave the country. And friends disappeared. We didn't even know whether they were going to be in England or they were going to be in Europe. And when I went to see Bob Marley, I could not believe that one of our friends from Uganda was actually there. I thought it was very surreal. You're looking at it, thinking, hang on, is this really happening? And yeah, this is the young chap we used to know very well, my family friends. And in fact, the man I met, when I saw there, was he had a lovely Alsatian dog, and he had I think they had about 6 puppies once, and he said, "Would you like one of these?" And I really wanted this cutest little thing you've ever seen. I really wanted this pup, and I thought, right, I've got to have this, but I knew my father would not be happy about that. He put it in a little box for me with a little sort of padding to make it comfortable. I put it on the back of my bike, and I cycled home. And first of all, went to my mum to say, "Look, I've got this puppy, and we need to tell Dad about it." There was no choice; we had to tell him. So my father looked in this box, and he looked at this puppy, picked it up, and he just melted. His face lit up, and that sort of everything changed. But I remember that pup was so. This is must have been about the time that Idi Amin took over Uganda. He overthrew the government and took over Uganda. And the pup, I called it Dandy because I used to love the comic book in those days. And Dandy was 2 years old when we had to leave the country. And I had to leave him behind because we couldn't take him with us. And that was heartbreaking. I never, ever forgave Idi Amin for what he did there. I haven't had the heart to go back to Uganda again to see where I grew up and all that. Because when we left, we had to leave him with somebody, and he didn't stay with them for long. He just ran off, and unfortunately got run over outside our old house because he wouldn't let anybody in the house. I don't want to say that. Poor memories there. But yeah, it must be at least 30 years since I've been back, actually standing there. I've driven past it and been to the back of Kings Heath, but to go to the location where I used to work. And I can't believe how sad it was, how run down it is. All the shutters everywhere. There's no life there anymore. It's not a big precinct, but it was buzzing in the old days. All the shops were open, the lights were on.
Well, I've been on Kings Heath 50 years. When I left home, I was given a council flat, very kindly. Yes, and it was very different, but of course it wasn't the old Kings Heath. It would be in the 80s, and you know, it's perfectly adequate for us. We've got a garden, we've got a balcony, you know, it's a nice place to live. And we are only the second tenant of the flat since it was built. And I'm afraid we're now the oldest inhabitants on the block, so it's a little different. So we're surrounded by all these new people, younger people, so we have to adapt. I was working for the council as a part-time gardener, community gardener. This is how the thing started. It was only ever 1 day a week. So we just went on from there, really. But we were given some tools and set up. We got a grant for a path, and then we managed to get a team of volunteers. The volunteers are the key to the thing, because you have an area like that to work with. But of course, it started only with 2 allotment strips. I think they're 5 poles, and there were other allotments alongside us. But now we're the last surviving cultivation there. But, you know, we have so much space to look after, so we can do a little bit in each corner, really, in several different purposes, you know, with the wildlife area, the pollinator area, the herb area, the sensory garden. We do sort of experimental things, see if they work. Sometimes they don't, but there you are. Basically, they're large containers, and they're above the level of the pavement, so you've got a 3 or 4 foot drop. So whatever you put in there, it's got to be big, otherwise you can't see it. If you look at it from down the road, it's got to be a statuesque plant. You put a few daisies in, then nobody's going to notice them, because they're right up at sort of shoulder level. So you've got to take the the size of the plant into consideration, and something really hardy and something that will stand being trampled on by children or pulled up. So you've got to pick a really tough plant and hopefully something that's pretty to look at and maybe even give a fruit. When I started that bed by the steps, it was just like a bit of waste ground. There were big brambles growing in it and nettles. And by degrees I've got rid of them and just planted tough plants and let them fight it out amongst themselves, basically. But hopefully it'll be something that the community appreciate as well. So we will have to consult with more people to see what they'd like there.
A little part of the memory of going to see my dad's mum was when he took me to the off licence. And I remember it just being me and my dad, which was quite unusual. Normally I was with my mum a lot, but he took me to the off licence to get something from the shop. And I remember him pointing at a coconut ice and saying, "Oh, I used to have them when I was a kid from this shop." And he said, "Do you want one?" And I was like, "I've never had one." And he bought it for me, and it was like the best thing ever because it's just coconut covered in sugar. And my memory, whenever I eat one of those now, I literally get pulled back to that memories. But I do remember the square as well then, like there being lots of shops and it being quite busy, and people in and out the door and hearing the buzzer on the door and things like that. So whereas you go back there now and it's like a bit of a ghost town.